And you know, it's not just the hardliners who have their doubts. Iran's neighbours, Israel and Saudi Arabia, aren't convinced either. And that's one of the things we want to look at now, the regional impact on things like influence and energy, power. Leila Benali is going to help us with that. She is the Director of Energy at the research group IHS. I wonder, Leila, just first of all, you can give us your view on these sanctions that are being lifted. 7 billion out of a potential, I guess, 100 billion in the end. Will there be any discernible impact somewhere along the line?
Well, I mean, it will have some impact at some point. I mean, remember, we are just, the sanctions are not completely lifted. I mean, they are freezing for the time being the further reduction of crude sales for Iran. So for Iran to get back to its pre-sanctions level, I mean, it will take some time. There are a few issues around that. I mean, the first issue is time, actually. Remember, this deal is reversible at any time in the next 6 months. It's temporary and reversible. So we think that it will take Iran some say 3 months to add around 500,000 barrels a day, which is 500,000 barrels a day. And then to get back to the pre-sanctions level of 3.5 to 3.6 million barrels a day of production, that will take probably a year, depending on how the fields would shut down. We're just assuming here that the fields would shut down properly.
If we talk about Iran getting back in the game, what has it got to do? What actual work? Is this infrastructure work that it has to do? Was it going to have to really play catch-up because of the time under sanctions?
You're right, it's everything. It's all what you mentioned. The first thing to put in place is what is needed to get back to, as I said, the pre-sanctions levels and maintain that. That's the first step. And in that case, I mean, you will have basically two issues. The first one is time, as I mentioned. During the next 6 months and beyond, Iran should continue to have access to equipment. So for the time being, sanctions are frozen, but sanctions should, for Iran to get back to that level, sanctions should continue to be frozen for some time. The second issue is natural gas. I mean, we don't talk about it a lot, but the natural gas sector is impacted much. The impact on the natural gas sector is much higher than on the oil sector. And Iran reinjects, just to maintain its level of production, oil production, it reinjects the equivalent to what a country like AlJazeera exports. And natural gas, as I said, is a key component of the Iranian energy sector. In the next few years, if Iran wants to go to the 4 million barrels a day that I was talking about, the natural gas sector will be hit. So you will see the impact on some areas in Iran, like the northern areas, which would be freezing in the next winter. So that might create a shortage in the next few years. So all these reasons will make it very difficult for Iran to get back, I would say, to its pre-sanctions levels. The last point is investment. We're talking about money here. I mean, the Iranians, our oil officials, are stating that they need around $100 billion just to revitalize the Iranian energy sector. We're not talking about excess capacity. We're just talking about getting back to normal status.
Leila, just one more thought on, and this is moving into the sort of geopolitical side of things rather than just the economics and the energy, but the way that Iran plays into the region with its Sunni neighbours, how might this, again, Iran sort of coming back as an economic force, change those relations? Is there potential for problems there, I guess I'm asking? Right.
I mean, it's true that the lack of engagement, at least officially, because there was an official engagement, but at least officially that lack of engagement of the GCC countries has been perceived as a problem, has been perceived as a great concern for these countries, that Iran might be back on the regional and global scene as an economic powerhouse and as an energy powerhouse. But at the same time, allow me to insist again, we are talking about an interim agreement, a limited agreement, a reversible agreement. So between now and then, I mean, whether this agreement would question, I would say, let's get to the facts, 70 years of American and Saudi relationships, and let's not forget about 35 years of mutual suspicion between Iran and its neighbors and the international community. I think it's too early to assess whether this sort of agreement will question that. My personal view is that this agreement will not question this sort of things, this sort of long-standing relationships and the long-standing mutual suspicion. There might be other reasons why the relationship between say, the US and Saudi Arabia might be getting fragile at some point, but this agreement is not part of them, at least it's not high on the agenda. So I don't think so. And on the other hand, I think the relationship between Iran and the GCC countries is so diverse, it's so multifaceted. I mean, Oman has been a great, not ally, but at least having good relationships with Iran historically and recent years as well. The UAE has a own sort of trade and relationships with Iran. So I don't think we can really put the whole relationships into a basket. I think it's much more multifaceted and complicated.
Quite right. It is baby steps at the moment, isn't it? Leila Benali, thank you so much for your time.
Exactly.
We do appreciate it.